So we are in this wonderful month. Thank you. I'm a happy it's snowing person. It's like, if we're going to have winter, let's have it be winter, right? So I'm happy about this. It's a little weird for me. I lived in Phoenix for a while, and it was always like, okay, let's decorate the palm trees, like this is weird. So I like it to have snow and cold. It makes sense to me. But we are celebrating this season of the birth of Christ, and it's one of my favorite times of year, this whole holiday season. It lets me talk about Jesus, because I like to talk about Jesus, as some of you may have noticed. But for those of you who are new, just want to disclaim, I may talk a little differently than what you've heard before. So breathe, we'll be okay. Because my evolution in understanding these teachings has been pretty remarkable when I think about it. As a young child growing up in a Southern Baptist church, I was taught the Bible. We were encouraged to know the Bible and used to know the chapters and the order in which they came, and studied all these things. And sometimes if you passed it, at your vacation Bible school, you passed the test, you got a prize, and it was just a sweet deal. So I learned the Bible as a kid, but there were some questions I had, because I was taught from a very literal point of view. Now, I'm not making anybody wrong. I think all paths to the divine, it's all good. But I was taught that this is a very literal Word of God. And that created some confusion for me. So, because when you try and read the Bible literally, you find that there's some pretty glaring errors. Not errors, but just like, what? Is Jesus the person that says who is without sin cast the first stone, or the one that's coming back with the sword and cutting the wheat from the chaff? Which is it, right? So when I came into a center very similar to this, and I began to embrace a new way of understanding what I had learned as a child, I began to read and I began to understand this science of mind that Ernest Holmes put together was based upon the teachings of Jesus, but in a very different light, in a very different concept. And so, whereas as a child I was taught that Jesus was outside of me, that God was outside of me, and Jesus became a portal to the divine, I began to understand that, as we talked about last week, Jesus not as the great exception, not as fundamentally different, but perhaps Jesus stood as the great example of what is possible for all humanity. And as I began to embrace that concept, then I began to hear and understand those words where he said, "Greater works than these you shall also do." Meaning, each of us has inherent within us the potential to live a Christ-filled life. And so that then began this journey of spiritual healing for me. I began to understand that there are certain spiritual principles at work in this universe in which we live. And that if we cooperate with those spiritual principles, things work. And if we fight the spiritual principles, things don't work. It's nothing personal. It's not some power choosing you over some other, but rather that it's, as I always say, whether you choose the law of gravity or the law, any of the universal laws, any of these laws that we work with all the time, it's nothing personal. If I step over this stage, the law of gravity is not punishing me. However, there will be a direct consequence of doing so. So I'm going to just stand back here for a little bit, because I know that makes sense to me. So too, as I began to appreciate and understand these teachings and began to work within my own consciousness, I began to realize what Ernest Holmes said, is that we must seek to realize the spiritual universe regardless of any condition which appears. If we must seek to know this if we would have the greater good. So I realized that the lack of good, if you will, in my life, that the way that life was not showing up for me as I wanted it to, was not about something being withheld from me, but rather a state of consciousness within my own self that was withholding my good. And as I began to heal my own concept of self, then I began to realize all things are possible. So Ernest Holmes says to us, what we really need is spiritual healing of the mind. You see, so often what we want to do is we want to heal conditions. And so sometimes if we're faced with a condition in our life, perhaps we don't have enough money. What's the logical answer to that? Get more money, right? And so we think that the answer would be, I'll go get more money. But what we also know is that if I don't have a change in consciousness around that, then I will just recreate the same situations over and over and over. That the dollar amount has very little to do with it until we get the right relationship. Speaking recently with a person who had gone through a series of negative and even abusive relationships. And this person was looking for a new relationship, but this time wanted to be healthy. And it's like, good, we're on a track here, right? However, and I'm just going to tell you this, have you changed? Have you changed inwardly so that you are making welcome that right and perfect relationship? You see, so often our mind says, I'll go find a new situation to replace the old situation, but if I haven't had a corresponding interchange in my being, then what I tend to do is recreate situations over and over and over. We call them a pattern. Some would call it evidence. Right? And sometimes we use that evidence to reinforce the belief system that's not working. I'm going to encourage you not to do that, but So then along comes these teachings that say, wow, what if this master teacher was opening a way for us to understand universal spiritual principle, to be a healing presence, to awaken to a greater life, to see beyond the realm of appearance into the realm of spirit. And perhaps if we were willing to open to who we truly are, to release those negative thoughts, those negative beliefs, those negative things that we have formed over a period of time, and live in a more expanded state of being, then we would create a new reality. Not because somehow the universe has now found favor with us, but rather we have simply opened up the channel through which greater good can flow. So as I was contemplating this, I was thinking, well, let's talk about sin. We never get to talk about sin around here, right? So you're like, ready? Cool. Let me get my Bible. I'll be right back. No. So let me just get clear on all this. Sin is simply error. Okay? I want to give you some framework for what I want to talk about, because I'm going to tell a story we all know, but I hopefully will have some new insight and awareness. And in these stories of Jesus, what we tend to do is mythologize those stories. They're so real and alive with us sometimes that we don't even realize how much we've added to that. That's why I say, if you get the deluxe nativity scene with all of the players, you get the wise men, you get the shepherds, you get the angel, you get all of it. Except if you go and read the book, you don't have all those characters all together. One story has wise men, one story has shepherds. So understand that there's a compilation of information here, and we're all sorting through it. So today we're going to sort through it from my metaphorical and metaphysical way, but I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about this idea of Jesus, who has now, at this point in his ministry, has been baptized, has had this awakening, has had this experience. But before the public ministry begins, he goes off into the desert for prayer and meditation and fasting, as he did, for 40 days and 40 nights. Again, metaphorically, we know that 40 is a period of completion, not necessarily that long. But while there, he encounters, in walks Satan. Now, so we're going to play with all the players today. So Satan, I would invite us to have a different concept, perhaps. What if all of these stories in the Bibles are not about literal events, but rather states of consciousness? Some of you know Satan. Some of you live with Satan, right? I know I have. And it's not your spouse. Just want to let you know, right? So, what if these angels are the divine thoughts and those fallen angels are those thoughts that fall away from the divine? What if, and what do we know about Satan? Satan is the leader of the fallen angels. So Satan is that point of consciousness that tests us and tempts us. As I said, sometimes in the Bible it says to us, put God before all things, first commandment. Have no other gods before me. But sometimes we make gods of other things, don't we? So perhaps today we can just, for fun, look at it from this point of view. So here we are, Jesus praying, fasting, 40 days. You got to imagine he's getting a little hungry, right? Think, if I only had something to eat. Well, lo and behold. Then it says, then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. You think? The tempter came to him and said, if you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. Now, if you have all of the power of the universe available to you, would you not be tempted? You're already dying, jonesing for something, right? But here's what it says to us. Jesus said, it is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of the divine. You see, in another passage, Jesus says it is not what comes into our body, what comes through our mouth, but what comes out of our mouth that defines our life. Because if you think about what is the word is the thought made manifest. And so the way we speak is putting our ideas into form. It is this that is our sustaining life. So think of this metaphorically as he's saying, no, I won't be tempted by the ways of the world, but rather I am going to seek to know the divine. This is at the beginning of his ministry. He's not moved out into this. Now you have to wonder if you've ever been called by the divine to take that next step. We are tempted. Sometimes we're tempted in life to take shortcuts. Sometimes we're tempted in life, or tempted by life to do the easy thing, the fast thing. But Jesus is saying, no, I have to know that it is this power within me that is leading the way. It would be a sin, it would be an error to seek something else. He's about to enter into his spiritual ministry. Good. Got one down. But Satan, as we know, doesn't give up that easily, right? It's not like you get to have one affirmation and you're done with the process, right? Today I choose to be an expanded being. And everything from there just flows. It's so good, right? We realize it's an ongoing practice. So Satan, that thought of separation, comes back and says, okay, well, we did that. So it says, then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. And he says, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. And Jesus answered him and said, it is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test. You see, this error of pride, this error of there's nothing wrong with being proud of yourself, but there is a haughtiness that can come. And one of the things that we sometimes forget is there can be a spiritual arrogance sometimes. When we start to embrace this teaching, we say, well, you're saying I am God. And I'm saying you are God. And you're saying, cool. Now I get to run the universe. So let us define that you are one with that presence, but you are not all that presence is. Put shortly, you are not all that, okay? But you see, rather than using that, and again, I love these things because this is the struggle. If you have this power, how are you going to use it? And what I'm suggesting to you is we all have this power, and we must all confront those inner demons so that we don't move into lustfulness, which is the greediness or the craving, that we don't move into overdeveloped pride. And lastly, Jesus is tempted again. It says again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. It says, all this I will give to you if you will bow down and worship me. Then the devil left him. No, not yet, because Jesus has one more thing to say. He says, away from me, Satan. Thank you. That's an important piece. I'm glad I remembered to put that part in there. Away from me, Satan. Get thee behind me, some of us know. Worship the Lord your God and serve him only. You see, there's this interesting thing, and I think it's been interpreted wrongly, is that when we're saying put the divine first, we're not saying you can't have material good. But we are saying if you will put the divine first, if you will move into the state of consciousness, if you will move into that state of awareness, of expansion, of oneness, then you will see that all things are added to us. It is good. We should live an abundant life. We should have all of our needs met. But the mistake is thinking that the form will provide the thing that we really seek. It is in seeking the divine that all other things are added to us. We just affirmed, I will know the truth, and the truth will set me free. Knowing the spiritual truth and reality. So Jesus is tempted by greed, wanting. Now again, a lower level person who hadn't had the expanded state of consciousness that Jesus had might be tempted. I always say, if you knew you could turn water into wine, would you not be tempted to go into business? The overhead is wonderful. I mean, think of the money you could make. But you see, this message that you're here to use your spiritual power for a greater good in the world. It is not at the expense of having the things of the world, but it is about having it in right relationship and right-mindedness. So I love this story, and I really love this story from the perspective of not Jesus as different and separate and Satan as a power outside of it, but of this story of consciousness that we all struggle with. We're all in this journey, and we know we're awakening to this idea that we are spiritual beings, but we're faced with the things of the world all the time, aren't we? I have people say this to me all the time. Marty, I love what you talk about, but I need to be practical. It's like, okay, which means I need to put my worldliness first. And so I'm going to save you some time. It's Christmas. I feel like giving you a little gift. My suggestion is pray first, then act. Sometimes we act and then try and pray ourselves out of the action. Have you noticed this? This is all we're saying, is put the divine first. Make sure that we are expanding our consciousness of oneness, of divinity, of love, of joy, and then moving into the world to do the things that we are called to do from that perspective. All of our good comes back to us in ways pressed down and overflowing. We were just talking the other day with some friends who were saying, so interesting, as we put service first, our business expands. If we put our emphasis on serving and loving and doing that, it's amazing how business happens. But those who go after business, that they go after that greed, it becomes a repellent to their greater good. You see, we may achieve financial wealth, but we'll never have wealth in the larger context until we recognize the oneness and the joy. So I love these stories, these temptations of this person that we can all see as a great light for the world. I don't know what your challenges you're faced with today. My guess is you have some. But I can tell you that as we are moving into this season of light, of love, of goodwill towards all, that it's really so important for us to do that spiritual work, to move into that state of grace and awareness and understanding that we are not separate from the divine. That this season of awakening to the birth of the Christ can be a joyous event, not only in celebration of a person, but of a cosmic event that happens for each of us as we are willing to awaken to it. So I wish for you in this season great light, great love, and great joy. Let us pray. As we simply turn inward, breathing into that awareness, as Ernest Holmes used to say so simply and yet profoundly, there is one life. That life is divine. And that life is my life. That, as Jesus said, I live and move and have my being in this divine presence. And so as I remember this, my awareness of the divine in all things is expanded. I am knowing that the same intelligence that causes all things to be, that keeps the planets in perfect balance and motion, that causes the rains to fall, the flowers to grow, this one life is my life, and it is the life of each of us gathered here. And so as we gather together in that spiritual consciousness of wholeness, of love, of joy, of harmony, of peace, of abundance, we know that this is indeed our divine inheritance. And so as I speak this word of truth, I'm simply recognizing that presence of wholeness, revealing itself as health, as well-being, as vitality. I am knowing this presence of unconditional love is making itself known. As we fully and freely forgive ourselves and each other, a new awareness, a new opening, a new opportunity for greater love, for healed and transformed relationships takes place. I am knowing in this moment that we are abundant beings by our divine inheritance, for we are one with the source and substance of all good. As we bear witness to this spiritual truth and reality, we allow our lives to be healed and transformed. We realize we no longer need to make anything happen. We simply need to make the divine welcome. How freeing it is to live in that state of grace, of awareness, of joy and understanding. And because our cup is filled and overflowing, we extend a blessing to all people everywhere. We bless this spiritual community, for we know that it is indeed a divine idea that is unfolding in joy and love and harmony and abundance. We extend a blessing to our brothers and sisters around the planet. We're holding that high vision for a planet at peace, a world that works for all, a planetary awakening that allows truth and love and joy to be the order of the day. We speak this word of truth as we bless all priests, rabbis, ministers, teachers of every faith, for we know there's many pathways to the divine, and therefore we honor and celebrate them all. The Master Teacher said that where two or more are gathered, the I Am is there. And so we celebrate the awakening taking place everywhere and in every way. I invite you in this sacred and holy space that we have created to be in touch with that divine light within, to allow that light to shine brightly, to be a healing, loving presence in the world, to release any limiting belief, any thoughts that no longer serve, and to step into that Christed nature that we each have as a part of our inherent nature. How good it is to know this truth, and how grateful I am to speak this truth into that law of mind that operates upon the consciousness that we have established here. And so giving thanks that it is already done, it is already established, it is already complete. I simply release this word into that law, knowing that it is so. I give thanks, I allow it to be, as together we say, and so it is.